Well, hello friends. Welcome back to Quarantine Talk. Today we are going to take an email question from Brandon. So Brandon writes, greetings and question about system design. Hey Andreas, huge fan of Serenity OS, 90s computing, and your YouTube videos. Thank you for all the wonderful code and knowledge you're putting out there. I'm a professional engineer who frequently finds himself in large code bases that are a bit confusing. I'm not sure if it's due to my getting older, but I've noticed that even after grokking a system, the information begins to fade, particularly if I don't use it for a week or two. Writing an operating system and all of the accompanying software is a massive achievement, and one that I imagine requires a deep understanding of the system's broader architecture. As someone who's clearly quite successful working within such an environment, do you find that your understanding of a Serenity subsystem is paged out if you stop working on it for a while? If so, do you have any strategies for ensuring that your mental model of Serenity stays sharp? Do you have any helpful habits for keeping skills that you're not currently utilizing sharp? And a bonus question. You mentioned that you don't have a formal OS background and also emphasized the importance of knowledge seeking. How did you prepare before building some of the more complex bits of your OS? For example, threading or locks or process management or even building out a terminal. Is there an off-camera research session before you start writing code? Do you draft a design? Oof, sorry, this wasn't as brief an email as I'd intended to write. In any case, I greatly appreciate any insight you might be willing to share into your process and into how you manage reasoning about complex software systems. All the best, Brandon. So thank you, Brandon, for writing to the show. I really appreciate the thoughtful questions. So let me try to answer as best as I can. So I guess we'll start here. Do I find that my understanding of a Serenity subsystem is paged out if I stop working on it for a while? Yes, absolutely yes. This happens to me all the time, and I frequently make comments about it in videos whenever I have to page in some new part of the code that I haven't touched for a while. I start to feel rusty and slow, and I feel like a little bit, it's almost like a little bit like cringy for me, because I feel like, oh God, everybody can see me struggling to figure out how this thing works. And I don't know. In the past, especially at work, like I would try to hide this, or I would sort of pretend that it wouldn't happen, because I thought that this was something that made me a bad engineer, or I felt like almost like a little bit ashamed of forgetting how something worked. But I don't know, at some point I just accepted that that's just part of life, or at least it is for me. I can't keep all of this stuff fresh all the time. It just doesn't work. And there's nothing wrong with that. As long as you have the skill of picking things back up again, then it doesn't really matter if you lose them, because you just pick them back up, right? So really for me, the game is all about getting better at picking stuff up quickly. And I find that that's really the the $1 million skill. So if so, do you have any strategies for ensuring that your mental model of Serenity stays sharp? Well, my mental model of Serenity is kind of separate from the subsystems, because the individual subsystems, they sort of page in and out, but the mental model that I keep of Serenity, and I think this is something that's really only possible because of the way Serenity is developed, but because it's developed as a single unit, like it's all in one repository, it's one project, everything uses the same container classes and programming patterns and everything. The mental model is extremely consistent and sort of cohesive, right? So that's really my strategy for keeping the model sharp, is eliminating sort of ambiguities and things that would be done differently in different places, and settling on like a common shared way of doing things everywhere. And sometimes that comes with compromise, but I find that a single unified model of a large system is really valuable. So it's worth compromising a little bit if you can get that. But the next question there is, do you have any helpful habits for keeping skills that you're not currently utilizing sharp? Yes, I have one extremely helpful habit, which is that I work together with all the other people who are also contributing to Serenity, and I review code from people all the time, and people ask me questions like, oh, I want to do this, how do I do that? And I find that even if I'm not currently working on something, then if I can help whoever's working on that thing right now with whatever they're doing, even if it's just listening to them talk about what they're doing, or discussing some little design change or something, just having that little like social interaction with a piece of code, not necessarily that you're interacting by changing the code or even reading it yourself sometimes, but just talking about it with someone and talking about it at a high level can page in. I don't know what to call that. Like you're paging in the metadata about the code, but not the code itself. And I find that keeps my model of it relatively fresh, even though I'm not working on the code. An example of that in Serenity right now would be stuff like the text editing component, which I have a mental model of how it works, but I don't remember what the code looks like anymore, or what the names of things are. But actually, to go back to this question here about strategies about the mental model, as I was saying, like consistency in patterns and everything. For example, I know that if I want to go and edit the text editor component in Serenity, I'm going to be able to work out what everything is fairly quickly because it follows like naming schemes and everything. Everything is laid out in a way that's consistent with the rest of the system. So as long as I'm working somewhere in Serenity, I'm staying in that mindset of Serenity, I guess. So that's really the strategy. And I've heard from many other people who also work on the system that this is something that they find really compelling about it. The fact that whether you're working in user space or kernel space or in the GUI or somewhere else, there's this cohesive quality to the code that you feel like you're in the same project wherever you go. And I think that really helps people build better mental models. So let's see. Then you say, the bonus question is that you mentioned that you don't have a formal OS background and also emphasize the importance of knowledge seeking. That's true. I don't have any OS background whatsoever, and I do emphasize the importance of knowledge seeking. My background, the closest thing to an OS background I have is working on emulators. Like I've made various emulators over the years, and the most mature one is an x86 emulator. So I have a pretty decent understanding of how an x86 machine works, but I never wrote like the other side of the code. So I always thought of it as like these two things that are dancing with each other, if you will, like the hardware and the operating system, right? And I spent so many years implementing the hardware side in the emulator that when I started writing the Serenity operating system, it was obvious to me what I needed to do, like all of these little things, because I had already accommodated Linux and Windows and all these other operating systems for years. So I knew what they were trying to do. So I just had to do the same thing, if that makes sense. But that's not what your question is about. So your question is, how did you prepare before building some of the more complex bits of your OS, like threading or locks or process management and stuff? The way that I prepared for these things was to just do them badly and then iterate. That's the same way I do everything. If I know how to do something, I can do it pretty well right away. If I don't know how to do something, I'll just do it badly and then iterate. I think getting over one's fear to do things badly and iterate is one of the most important skills you need to build when it comes to systems engineering, systems development. Because when you're building out systems, then you're very often going to find yourself outside your comfort zone just because you can't possibly know everything, right? And you have to get good at that at pushing through that barrier that says like, hey, don't do this. You don't even know how to do this, and just start doing it anyway. And then over time you iterate on the thing and improve it, and you end up with something pretty good in the end. Because that's I don't know, that's just how it's always been for me. And that's something I struggled with when I started at Apple, especially because when I first started there, or before I worked at Apple, I had always somehow managed to be in jobs where I could focus on like a tiny little specific thing, and I didn't have to generalize too much. Now, I wasn't like incompetent at general stuff, but I was very comfortable doing like one specific thing. And when I started at Apple, my second manager that I had, because my first one quit quite soon after I started, I don't know, unrelated to me, but my second manager, he pushed me to do stuff outside my comfort zone and like get better at general programming. And that was really uncomfortable for me in the beginning, but it's something that I really appreciate, and I still think about to this day, how he would just assign bugs to me that I didn't know how to fix, and I just had to engage with it. And I really grew from that. And I still have this feeling in my gut of like disappointing him with some specific bugs that I still remember so well. Like there were some bugs that I just couldn't work out how to solve them, and ultimately I took too long and they were reassigned to someone else, and I still feel bad about that. But going through that experience really made me realize that I want to be the type of developer who can just work on anything, and like a generalist, right? That's the kind of developer I want to be. So since then, I strive to learn like the whole picture of things, and the Serenity system obviously is like my whole picture vision of an operating system that I'm trying to put into reality. And now lately that I'm getting so much help with it, it's almost as if it's going to actually happen. So that's really cool. And I should mention that since there are so many people helping out with the system lately, I'm trying to share the stuff that I learned about the importance of like becoming a generalist, right? And learning to go outside of your comfort zone, and like not only focusing on the one thing you're comfortable with, but like learning all kinds of styles of programming and systems design and stuff, and not worrying so much about building crappy stuff, because it's okay to build something crappy as long as you iterate on it. So the way that I prepared for the more complex bits was, like I said, I just made them badly and then iterated. And obviously, there are a lot more hours in the day than I record videos of, so I do a lot of programming that I don't record. But I tend to try to record whatever seems like it might be interesting to people, and more often than not, I record stuff that I haven't thought much about because I want to capture that process. So, for example, in my last browser hacking video I uploaded, it was about building a code generator for JavaScript bindings, and it was very, very much like building a crappy thing so that we can iterate on it, because I just want to put something into place so we can start, right? And I have like all these feelings about that code now that, oh, it's bad in this and that way, and it needs to be improved here and there, and we need to like put a proper parser in and so on. But the important thing at the moment was just to get something in so we can make progress. And yeah, that's really how I prepare. I guess I just start. But you ask, is there an off-camera research session before I start writing code? Do I draft a design? I don't draft designs ever, really. The only thing I ever draft is like a GUI layout in GIMP sometimes. but I really just start writing code. I find that my brain just locks up if I try to think too much about design, and if I just start writing the code and I build something, and then I don't know, once I have some piece of code that I can run, then my brain starts making a model out of it, and then I can iterate from there. I don't know, that's just what works for me. And I guess one thing I didn't mention is that I do often build things and throw them away, and I think that's another unappreciated or another like secret skill that I picked up at Apple from one of my friends there. That he told me one day that he had been telling me that he was working on something for a few days, and then I asked about it, and after he didn't talk about it for a while, and I asked about it, like, how's that thing going? And he said, oh, I threw that away. And I didn't understand, like, why did you throw it away? And he said that now that I know how to build it, I'm just going to throw it away and start over. And that was really interesting to me, and I'd never thought about doing that. Like, I always felt that once something was finished, it was important to save it and commit it and so on, turn it into patches. But then after talking to this guy, I learned that there's a great deal of value in building something and then throwing it away and then starting over and building it again. Because the lessons that you learn on the way, they accelerate your second build so much, and your second build is often so much better if you've done a first build. And it's really weird if you haven't tried it, but I encourage everyone to try that sometimes. Like, if you want to build something, make one quickly and then throw it all away and make it again, because you'll see that it's weird how much better the second one gets, and you get all these improvements in the second one that you were not expecting, because your model in your head of the problem that you're solving is so much sharper the second time around. Anyway, so I guess that's the off-camera research session that I do have sometimes, is that I do sometimes write things and throw them away. Sometimes it takes months before I come back to the same thing. So what's something like that? Like a lot of the early browser stuff. Like I started working on the browser in, like, I don't know, July last year or something. But I just built like the very initial stuff and then basically threw it away. But it was in the tree, but I just stopped looking at it, and it was crappy and unfinished. And then I just walked away from it for a while, and then came back later, and then I could attack it with this rejuvenated sense of what I was trying to do, if that makes sense. Anyway, I guess I would say this was not as brief an answer as I was hoping to give either, but I was trying to just answer the questions from my brain. So thank you, Brandon, for writing in, and everybody for visiting the Quarantine Talk video. I hope that your projects are going okay out there, and that everybody is having a pleasant time. I guess I'm gonna go and have some dinner, so I'll see you all next time. Bye.